People like to believe the Wild West was simple good. Men wore white hats, bad men wore black money, bought land, not souls. But what if that belief is wrong? What if the most dangerous thing in the Old West wasn't a gun but a receipt? Imagine a man standing in a lamplit room, dust still on his boots, coins heavy in his pocket. Across from him stands a woman he does not know. And then she says the sentence that splits his life in two. You paid for me. But because, miles away, he has a wife. This is not a story about passion. It is not even a story about sin. It is a story about ownership, money, and what happens when a man mistakes payment for permission. And by the end, you'll see why this story doesn't belong to the past at all. To understand what happened, we need to step back. The American frontier in the late 1800s was not lawless. It was unevenly lawful. Law existed, but it favored those who controlled land, cattle, rail lines, and cash. In most frontier towns, women had limited legal standing. Brothels were unofficial but tolerated. Marriage was sacred until money got involved, and a person's reputation mattered more than the actual truth. A rancher was not just a farmer. He was a credit holder, an employer, and often the town's backbone. Banks were far away. Courts where slow power flowed through debt. And this rancher, let's call him Caleb Harlan, was rich in the only way that mattered back then. He owned land, he owned cattle, and most dangerously, he was never told no. Caleb Harlan was not born cruel. He inherited responsibility early. His father died young, leaving him land and unpaid notes. Caleb learned fast. Survival meant leverage. He worked harder than most men paid debts. Others ran from expanded his ranch while neighbors sold theirs. By 40, he had over 1,000 head of cattle, contracts with a rail agent, a respected name, and a wife named Margaret. Margaret was quiet, respected the kind of woman. Townsfolk nodded too. Their marriage looked solid. But it was transactional. Caleb provided, Margaret endured, and endurance was mistaken for consent. One day, Caleb rode into the nearest town, a place called Dust Devil Creek. He wasn't there for supplies. He was there to collect a debt from a man named Silas, a failed prospector who owed him a significant sum. Silas had nothing, no money, no prospects, just a daughter named Alara. In a desperate and frankly horrifying move, Silas offered Alara to settle his debt. Now, in our modern world, this is unthinkable. But in the transactional world of the frontier, a debt was a debt. Caleb, a man accustomed to acquiring assets, saw this as just another transaction. He paid the remaining balance on Silas's debt, essentially purchasing Alara. He saw it not as buying a person, but as settling an account. The receipt he held in his hand wasn't just paper. It was a symbol of his power, a testament to the idea that anything and anyone could have a price. He took Alara to a room above the saloon, a place where such transactions were grimly common. He felt a sense of entitlement, the same way he felt when he bought a new prize bull. He had paid. She was his. This brings us back to that lamplit room. Caleb stands there, the smell of whiskey and dust in the air. Lara looks at him, not with fear, but with a chilling stillness. She says, "You paid for me. Now do it." Her tone wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge, a command. The words hung in the air, shifting the power in the room completely. Caleb, the man who owned everything, suddenly felt like he owned nothing. He was used to being in control, to giving orders, not receiving them.
Wait.
Her words stripped away the transactional nature of their encounter and forced him to confront the human reality of his actions. He hadn't just settled a debt, he had claimed a life. The "it" she spoke of wasn't just a physical act. It was the full, brutal weight of his ownership. She was daring him to be the monster he had paid to be. For the first time, Caleb hesitated. The image of his wife, Margaret, quiet and enduring at home, flashed in his mind. He had always seen his marriage as a transaction, too. Provided security, she provided a home and an heir. But had he ever truly seen her? Or was she just another asset, another part of his vast portfolio of possessions? In that moment of hesitation, Caleb's world began to fracture. He was a man defined by action, by taking what he wanted. But Alara's command paralyzed him. It wasn't seduction. It was an indictment. He couldn't bring himself to do it, not because of morality or a sudden pang of conscience, but because he was no longer in control. She had taken his power away with a single sentence. He left the room, leaving the money on the table, but the transaction was far from over. He rode home under a vast, empty sky, but he was no longer the king of his domain. He was a man haunted by a choice he didn't make. The receipt in his pocket now felt like a brand, a mark of his true nature. Back at the ranch, he looked at his wife Margaret differently. He started to see the years of silent endurance in her eyes. He saw the invisible fences he had built around her, the transactional nature of their entire life together. His empire of land and cattle suddenly felt hollow, built on a foundation of silent, unacknowledged ownership of others. The story doesn't end there. Ilara did not simply disappear. She used the money Caleb left to buy a small plot of land, a piece of the very frontier that had tried to consume her. She started a small business, becoming a landowner in her own right. She became a quiet but powerful symbol in Dust Devil Creek, a woman who had been sold but refused to be owned. Her existence was a constant, silent rebuke to Caleb. Every time he rode into town, he would see her a living reminder of his moral failure. His reputation as a powerful man began to erode, replaced by whispers. People didn't know the specifics, but they sensed a change. They saw a man who had lost his certainty, his swagger. Caleb Harlan, the man who was never told no, had finally been confronted with a boundary he couldn't cross. He had all the power money could buy, but he learned that it couldn't buy him permission. It couldn't buy him a clear conscience. What can we take from this story? It's a dark tale from the Old West, but its themes are timeless. It's a stark reminder that confusing payment with permission or endurance with consent is a dangerous and destructive path. Caleb's story shows us that true power isn't about ownership or control over others. It's about recognizing the humanity and autonomy in everyone, regardless of their circumstances. The most dangerous receipt isn't one for land or cattle, but one that you believe gives you ownership over another person's soul. That's a debt that can never truly be paid. The story of Caleb, Margaret, and Ilara isn't just a relic of the past. It's a mirror reflecting our own world, urging us to look closer at the transactions we make every day, both big and small, and to ask ourselves, are we respecting the people involved, or are we just settling an account? Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history.